This is People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm Curt Carstensen. This is episode 30 of the podcast, and my guest today is George Francis Kane. George is the founder of Freethought Toastmasters. It's my local community Toastmasters club that I belong to, and Freethought Toastmasters has an open house on Monday, May 20th, beginning at 6:30, but really 6 o'clock the doors will open. And that is the reason for the timing of this episode in conversation with George today. We'll learn a lot more about Freethought Toastmasters, how it got started, plus also George's longtime involvement in Toastmasters in general, in case you're just interested in Toastmasters more specifically than Freethought Toastmasters. And we get to learn more about George, an interesting guy who's been very passionate over the years about a few different things, including his involvement with Minnesota Atheists, as well as his background playing and teaching chess. If you'd like to watch a video of today's Being Wrong segment, that is available on the People I Know Show YouTube channel. Find links to that, as well as all the information you need to learn more about Toastmasters and the Freethought Toastmasters Open House in today's show notes. Now, into my conversation with George Francis Kane. On this week's episode of People I Know Show, I am joined by George Francis Kane. Hello, George.
Hello, Curt.
George, I'm thinking we met for the first time. It must have been February of a couple years ago, 2017, when I showed up to this room that we're in right now, the party room at the residence, the apartment or condo complex that you live at, for a Freethought Toastmasters meeting. And that's going to be the main thing I'd like to talk about today. But before I get to that, I was late for getting here. And it is a very rare experience in 2019 for me when I'm late. I'm late maybe more than I should be, but I couldn't reach out to you the way that I can with most other people because you've chosen to not have a cell phone.
Right.
And I'm curious how that decision was made and how it's held up however many years later when you've probably seen pretty much everyone else in your life have a cell phone.
Right. Well, as a matter of fact, I did have a cell phone for a couple of years. I took a business opportunity with Primerica, which did not work out too well for me, but I had to, for the job, have a cell phone. And I gave up on the business opportunity, but I was stuck for 2 years with the contract for the phone. I was paying over $100 a month for the telephone and doing nothing with it. It had no function except to keep the power cord occupied.
Yeah.
And I got a chess program for it, and some of the features or lack of functionality of it I didn't care for too much. And it just seems to me that I'm better off anything I want to do as far as technology with a laptop. It seems much better. So I'm not fond of telephony because I do have a landline at home. And it's a continual pain because it's going off all day long, and I ignore it. I do have caller ID, so a landline, for those people listening that don't remember those things, those are the ones that are attached to like the wall, right? Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe you realize this, maybe you don't, but I think you're rare in those distinctions for relying on the landline and at this point in history. But if it works for you, good for you. And thankfully you didn't leave and assume that I wasn't coming today because I was late, because I really felt kind of anxious because I didn't know what to do to alert you of my continued tardiness. But the reason that I'm here today specifically is Freethought Toastmasters, the club that I've now been involved with for over 2 years, has an open house on the 20th of May. It's a Monday evening in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I want this conversation to serve as both an invitation to anyone listening to come to our specific open house, but knowing that there's people listening from different places, just in general, a Toastmasters conversation of what's been valuable to you. So first, before we get into our specific club, I know you've been very involved in Toastmasters. When did it start? Why? And what has it done for you?
Okay. Well, first off, I first heard of Toastmasters back in the 1970s. I was making my living as a chess player and chess teacher in New York City. And I am pretty good as a lecturer because generally I understand from the questions people ask what level they're at, and I can give answers that are catered to where they are. And one of my students, after a lecture, came up to me and asked, "Have you ever heard of Toastmasters?" Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that the reason he said that was because my public speaking, is just littered with ahs and ums. But so that was in the 70s. So I really had not heard of Toastmasters, didn't give it another thought until the early 1990s, 1992. I was working at Unisys in San Diego, Rancho Bernardo, actually, northern San Diego County. And they formed a new Toastmasters club at work. And I really had not done much since arriving in San Diego as far as getting to know people, developing any sort of social life or anything. Mm-hmm. So I went as a guest to a few of the Toastmasters meetings. And I think that what most inspired me to join the club was that there were some attractive young ladies in the group whom I wanted to flirt with. But
mm-hmm. That always gets you, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I did find quickly that I enjoyed an audience. And since I didn't have much of a social life at that time, I was spending a lot of time working on each of my speeches, really to get the most of impact out of each of them. And that was the time in which I, worked most at my public speaking skills, but really found that I enjoyed getting response out of the audience and became in love with the Toastmasters Club meeting. Now, I did not get involved in anything beyond the club until a couple years later, at least. In 94, Unisys shut down the plant that I was working at and moved me to Roseville in Minnesota. And my first day at work in Roseville, I gave a speech at the Toastmasters Club there. I joined the club in Roseville when I was still in California. Mm. And after a year that I was there, they elected me president. And so I had to attend area council meetings. And the following year, I was recruited to be an area governor. They're now called area directors, but at that time they were area governors.
Do you think they saw something in you, or they needed somebody for these jobs and they want the new guy to try it?
A little of both. The general criteria for an area director, and each area director does try to find his successor before he leaves office. But the general criteria are that they're competent communicators, they've reached the first educational level, that they've been a club president or vice president of education. And I had met both of those criteria, and so I was one of the candidates that they'd be looking at. And I've been an area governor a couple of times. When I was area governor the second time, all of my fellow area governors in the division recruited me and encouraged me to run for division governor for the following year. So I did take up that position. And it was at that time, really, that I formed Freethought Toastmasters. I got started when I was an area governor because I had the idea that the atheist community really needed a place in which its members could hone their skills and develop their arguments and every topic of interest to atheists. And I found that it was hard getting the club up to the 20 membership requirement in order to get chartered.
What year is this?
1999. Actually, 98, I think, was when I first got started. And usually Toastmasters clubs are given a lot of support by the district to try to build their club and get started, get launched successfully. But after I filed the paperwork to try to charter a club, and the year changed and we had new officers in, it turns out that the new director of the district, which was District 6 at that time, now we're in District 106, but was a lady who was a very devout Christian. And I didn't know this until later, but she said to other members of the district leadership at that time that this club would get chartered over her dead body.
Really? So you had something that you're up against there.
Yeah, and we weren't getting any support at all from the district. But finally, the lieutenant governor of marketing and the Frontier Division governor worked in collusion to help us. And with their help, we did successfully get chartered in 1999. And they did it in such a way that even though they're making reports at every one of the meetings, the gatherings, of how progress is going in each division, they were able to keep our name out of it, and the district governor didn't realize until later that we were the club that chartered, the one she said would get chartered over her dead body. So I was not able to fulfill my original plan with the club. The original plan was to make it a company club, open only to members of Minnesota Atheists. Now, the idea is that I didn't want people coming in who specifically wanted to undermine and destroy the club, which I think for an atheist, well, a Freethought club for the Toastmasters, was a possibility. I thought it was possible.
I suppose. Yeah. Was it a fear?
Yeah.
Like you're trying to do something that you believe is a good thing for people that you relate to, and you're just afraid that, I guess, the lady that was in charge of giving you the charter, that was step one. But there's probably a lot of people, especially 20 years ago, that it's just, free thought atheism was probably a very strange thing for a lot of people.
Sure. I've encountered that in a number of different settings, but in Toastmasters getting started here. So I'd wanted it to be a company club. And I thought that if it were a community club, that it could be a problem, because Toastmasters clubs are forbidden by Toastmasters International to discriminate against any members or potential members on the basis of religion, for one thing. So it would just be easier to keep it an all Freethought club if all the members were members of Minnesota Atheists, but we couldn't get up to 20 members that way. We decided to be a community club, which makes us open to anyone of interest. We should be voting members in, but usually that's just a formality because we know nothing about the person when he comes to the club. But it's worked out really well. We have not had any problems with any members of the club, even though not all of them have been atheists. Some prefer to call themselves other things, such as skeptics or rationalists. There may even have been a couple who actually had some religious, spiritual beliefs, but chose not to talk about them in the club setting. And, of course, it's not only topics of interest to atheists that are the subjects of speeches in our club.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I had expectations of that when I came here the first time, but I think what drew me in with the little that I knew about it the first time, just to come check out a meeting, and anyone is able to, as far as I know, except for maybe the business clubs, for any community club, anybody is able to come as a guest to any meeting, anytime, and with no pressure, I'd think, in most cases, to join, just to kind of see what's going on. And that's what I did. little over 2 years ago. And I got good vibes from the people. I think as I've opened up and come out as an atheist on previous episodes of the podcast, that was a very difficult thing for me to do in my life. And just showing up to a place where I thought I could relate to a lot of the people that were probably there, just felt at ease in this trying to find my place in the world among maybe a lot of people that don't quite understand why I think the way that I think.
Now, in fairness to other clubs, Toastmasters clubs are always supportive of their members. That everyone in the club wants all the other members to succeed. They encourage them, they support them, try to give them feedback, and do everything possible to make them successful, be successful in giving their speeches and the other roles that they take. But it is a good idea for anyone generally to who is thinking about joining a Toastmasters club to find the clubs that are convenient to him for time and location, and to go to a few different clubs, because even though all clubs should be supportive, clubs are all different and all have their own personalities. And I do think, though, that this is the only club that people will find with this particular niche, that the other people in the club, being atheists, humanists, skeptics, and so on, that one can feel comfortable giving a speech on these topics. I know of one member, for example, who had been at another club and had tried giving a speech about the historicity of Jesus and was actually asked not to come back.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really had to encounter that or think about that. I feel like for a moment, though, maybe we should step back. Because you're in a few different Toastmasters clubs.
I'm in 3 currently.
So when someone asks you about Toastmasters, what's your brief pitch of just explaining what it is? I think it's kind of obvious, but maybe if someone's never heard of it, they just want to know the brief version of why they would ever show up to any Toastmasters meeting.
Right. Toastmasters is the world's largest all-volunteer organization devoted to education in public speaking and leadership. It has grown enormously. It used to be a standard thing to say that there are Toastmasters clubs in 80 countries, but I think it's really grown a lot in recent years, and that it's more than 80 countries now. As a matter of fact, the growth is fastest outside the United States, whereas for a long time Toastmasters was principally a United States organization that had clubs elsewhere in other countries too. But now members from other countries, from Asia especially, have taken roles such as the international director of Toastmasters International. I'm not sure. I believe that the current president, Lark Dooley, is an American, but I'm not positive. And they've moved their annual convention to different sites too. That a couple of years ago it was in Kuala Lumpur. This year it was in Toronto, I believe. Next year it's going to be in Denver, which is where their new international headquarters is. No, excuse me. I'm sorry. It was in Denver this year, or will be in Denver this year in August. Next year it's going to be in Paris.
Wow. And I think what I kind of forget about sometimes, like the reason I come here is to practice my public speaking, and I really do enjoy the other people in the group. Some people, and I'm sure you've gone to certain levels that you can get into here, they pursue the competitions with the intent of really advancing and maybe getting an opportunity to go to one of these cities to compete for possibly an international award with public speaking.
Right.
So I guess explain that process. If someone was here and getting better and wanted to compete, how many steps along the way might they be able to present themselves in their speech into possibly getting some really great recognition?
Right. We have just cut back from having 2 contests during the course of the year, fall and spring, to only the spring. And the only one that goes on is the International Speech Contest. There are other contests which might be a secondary contest, which are humorous speech contest, tall tales contest, and evaluation contest. But it's only the international contest that goes on eventually to the International Convention and the World Championship of Public Speaking. Curiously, the International Speech Contest is the only one of the contests which must be conducted in English.
Okay.
Right. Because it's the only one that goes on.
Yeah, ultimately, people from across the world are going to need to speak the same language so those that are voting can understand everybody.
Right. And I have known a couple of people who have gone on to regional and even the World Championship. And they are quite dedicated, quite serious about rehearsing their speeches, about getting every little nuance out, rehearsing every gesture, getting feedback from different groups by giving the same speech over and over again to different groups that they're going to advance to regional and international with. And I think that everyone, though, benefits. Everyone enjoys going through it, even if you don't go very far. There's a contest at the club level, and the winner at the club level advances to the area level. Now, an area is usually 5 or 6 clubs that have an area director who visits them several times during the year. Then the winner of the area contest moves on to the division contest. And there are, in the current district, the district we're currently in, 5 divisions this year. Next year, we're adding a 6th division. And then the winners of the division contests compete at the district convention. And we just held the district convention a couple of weeks ago. The winners of the district convention, and this varies, I'm not sure of the rules. It used to be that there was a regional convention, and the contestants all went to the regional convention. Now, as I understand it, the regional convention is held in conjunction with the international convention, but they're trying something different this year that they've never done before. That being that the speeches for the regional contest are videotaped and sent ahead. And so the winners of the regional contest are picked by videotape, by watching the different contestants on tape.
Because you get a different feel for a speech probably in person than on video, but that also with people all over the world, it probably helps expedite the process quite a bit.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, the speeches are very different depending on what level you're competing at, even if you're present. Find that it takes longer to give a speech the higher level you go. Because when you give a speech at a club, there are 15 people in the room, let's say. And so you deliver a laugh line, people laugh, takes a couple seconds, and you move on. At the area level, there are maybe 30 people in the room. Mm-hmm. There's more laughter. You have to wait for the laughter to subside before it going on. It takes longer. You get to the division level, and there are maybe 50 people in the room. You get to the district level, and there are 150 people in the room. And so it throws your timing off.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what's the furthest you've ever been able to advance in any of these competitions?
Division.
Okay.
Division. I've been in a couple of tall tale contests. I seem to enjoy those and do well in those that have gotten up that high. Once I did it in the International Speech Contest, and I'm actually a little handicapped because the International Speech Contest, your speech should be personal. It should appeal both to the heart and the head. And I, on the other hand, have had an objective when I've competed and tried to go beyond the club of doing something persuasive on a topic of interest to atheists that could have some broader appeal, such as secularism, church-state separation, arguing for that. And that sort of issue speech is not really the best type of speech designed to inspire the judges to vote for you.
Okay. But you found that to be more important to speak of something of value to you than necessarily try to do what it takes to give yourself the best chance of advancing.
Right. Now, someone from our club did make it to the district contest in the International Speech Contest. And from the audience reaction, I think he really should have won. And his was not a message speech at all, really. It was actually a speech that one would have been more likely to see in a humor speech contest. But his name was David Malander, and he was a very large, very assertive personality guy. And the theme of his speech is that he has the solution to life's problems that he can help you with and tell you how to cope with every problem that you might encounter in life. And then he goes into the speech, gives some examples. And the punchline at each example he gave was, "I don't care." And so it got to where the audience was joining in. They could see the punchline coming, and the audience was yelling out, "I don't care," every time he came to that line. And it was hilarious. But probably the inadequacies of the sound system might have tripped him up, that at the very end, his concluding lines, and I can't remember how it got set up, but it had something to do with birds. And he said, "I don't give a flying flock." And it's possible that portions of the audience misheard him. In fact, we know that portions of the audience misheard him. And he would have lost votes among the judges if they misheard him. So, yeah, David Malander might easily have won district, but instead he was second or third.
I don't know what level it was at, but my first introduction to Toastmasters was, I'm going to say somewhere between like 6 and 10 years ago. My brother's been in Toastmasters for a long time. He's a realtor, and I think that was to get better at, doing that job. It was encouraged to him to join Toastmasters. So I showed up once to videotape him doing a tall tales contest, 1 or 2 steps beyond the club level. And it was really good, but everyone was really good. I don't know that he advanced that day, but I saw that it was kind of fun to be around, but I never personally felt the desire to join until a couple years ago. Some things transpired in my life where I felt more motivated to do some different things, and in realizing that at some point I might want to be an advocate vocally and put myself out there. And if I'm ever going to do that, I think it's best that I practice. So I don't know, in 2+ years, I've probably given, maybe it's been 10 speeches. Here we meet twice a month, yes, which I really like. And I think you designed it that way on purpose. And still, with our club being somewhere right around 20 members, usually that means you'll give a prepared speech every 3 months, maybe on average. And there's opportunities to jump up and fill in if someone can't be there. So a lot of opportunities to speak, but maybe not too many, because as much as I enjoy giving speeches, it's kind of that week preparing for it. And for me, the final days and hours preparing for it, it's kind of a tough thing on the schedule. It can be, but it's always worthwhile knowing that I feel like I've gotten a lot better since the beginning. I guess I can't know for sure, but I feel like I have, and it's a good process to be a part of.
I mentioned that when I first joined Toastmasters, it was in San Diego, and I discovered that I really enjoyed an audience, and I didn't have much of a social life, so I was spending a lot of time working on all of my speeches. And I told the vice president of education and others that if there's ever a hole for speaker, just tell me and I'll fill in. I can give a speech in short notice. And indeed, that club used to, it used to give out an award for best speaker at each meeting. And certainly I wanted to be the speaker anytime there was only one speaker. But under those circumstances, I got my CC, which is Competent Communicator. Actually, it was at that time Competent Toastmasters, CTM award, which is 10 speeches, the first 10 speeches. And I got that in 10 months.
Okay, wow. And you were meeting probably once a week in that club?
Once a week in that club. But we only had 2 speakers. Now, in this club, we meet twice a month, but we have 3 or at times 4 speakers.
Yep.
So, makes up for the number of opportunities, pretty much.
And I don't know who wrote this line that appears on the Freethought Toastmasters website, but the meeting of twice a month, and you must have designed it that way, knowing that things that you commit to that are once a week can be burdensome in some ways. And I find this to twice a month just doesn't seem like so much. Even though I'm driving about 30, 35 minutes each way to get here, I find it to be worthwhile knowing that it's only twice per month.
Once a week is pretty much standard in company clubs, but everyone's there at work. You know, they just have to take a break at lunchtime and come to the Toastmasters.
Walk down the hallway,
meeting. Yeah. Whereas a club like this, it's more of an effort for people to have to get there every week at the same time. So
for you, the effort to get here is not hard at all because it's in your building, but
right.
You do put in a lot of effort, or at least it appears you must be from everything you do here. And one of the reasons I like this club so much is I get to try different food every time I'm here, and it's you that's behind all of it. And right. I don't think you have to in any way. You've chosen to, and explain that, because that probably is a very unique thing for a Toastmasters club.
Sure. For a while, there's a longer history before this, but I'll just start a few years ago. We had a plan that we would have Toastmasters meetings and then go off to a nearby restaurant. And this was a chance to socialize when we went to the restaurant after the meeting. But there were a few problems with that. One was that not everyone wanted to go to the dinner afterwards. Secondly, that after the meetings, it was sort of natural for people to hang around here. And in order to get to the restaurant, I had to kick everyone out so that I could lock the room up.
Okay, yeah.
And so it seemed to have the reverse effect, that instead of providing more unifying socializing activity for the club, it was breaking that up. So one of the members suggested that let's have a meal here after the meetings. And so I agreed to that. It is harder to do it after the meeting than before because not all things that I might fix would keep easily to be ready to eat right after. It would be easier for me.
Because we meet for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you're preparing usually, most of it's prepared, and then sometimes as the meeting's ending, you're kind of scrambling to make sure everything else is ready at about 8 o'clock when the meeting ends.
Right. And I have particular problems with this club in that we have one member with celiac disease, so I have to have a gluten-free possibility. One member who's a vegan. And a couple of members who are vegetarian, one very strict and the other not so strict. And so I want to have provide something that is gluten-free, that's vegan, that everyone else in the club will still like. And so my general solution is to do something like a salad, a grain bowl, a soup, and have add-ins so that the vegan and vegetarian can eat it and it's gluten-free, and everyone else can have a bowl of it and toss in chopped ham or shredded chicken or cheese or hard-boiled egg cut up, that sort of thing.
And it works. I enjoy, I don't know how many times it's been now. You made something different every single time based on my memory in a little over 2 years. And almost every time it's something that's unlike anything I've ever had before. And I would say the success rate for my palate of like really liking it is above 90%. And the times that maybe it's not my thing so much, it isn't like it's bad. It's just like, this is something new that maybe isn't my favorite thing. But for most part, I just love what you're coming up with. And like, if you can explain what you had just the most recent meeting, you list off the ingredients, and so much of this I've never really thought about or heard of. So how did you come up with the most recent recipe, for instance?
All right. The most recent recipe was a beet salad. Now, there is a recipe that my grandmother used to do called salad russe. And I've done that a couple times in recent years and brought them to picnics during the summer. And salad russe was beets and potatoes and carrots and peas and a mayonnaise-based dressing. And it was well received, but I thought, what else can you do with beets? And I roast the beets rather than boil them, as my grandmother used to do. And I looked up beet salads, and they seem to be mostly beets plus nuts of some sort and a fruit, such as apples. And so I thought, well, I could still have beets and the carrots and peas. I'll do away with the potato. But I had some pears, which are nice and ripe, and I made a raspberry vinaigrette dressing for it. And I think it really came together pretty well.
It really did.
And then on the side, I had I diced ham to throw in, shredded chicken to throw in, and crema and some gorgonzola crumbled cheese. And so it went well.
Just another indication of how this club is probably very different than most other Toastmasters clubs. Besides the motivation for you to start the specific Freethought Toastmasters Club nearly 20 years ago, just the fact that you can come here, get your Toastmasters experience, have a meal that's going to be maybe testing your routine of what you normally eat, like it does for me. I really enjoy coming here. So I do encourage anyone that might possibly be interested to join us on the 20th. And I'll put that information to find how to find this place in the show notes of this episode. But I guess that leads me back into just trying to understand you a little bit. And we'll get into the personal growth and my being wrong segment here as we move forward shortly. But the makeup of who you are, that this club exists, that you have the passion and the talent for cooking, as we just talked about, but also that you want this space for people that you can relate to practice their public speaking. What made you, if you can somehow come to a point where you really went down in some of these directions where you were pretty confident about who you are and what inspires you to do some of the things that you do?
Let me talk first about how I got into Minnesota Atheists. I was a 1960s radical. I graduated in 1970 from the University of California at Berkeley. And I went through the test of faith, I guess, in my sophomore year. And all of my classes seemed to relate to the Middle Ages and questions of worship and so on. Apologetics. And I came to the atheist conclusion then, but did not consider myself an atheist. I rather felt that the God question is a an invalid question, very logical, positive approach, that since there is not sufficient evidence to answer the question, that it's just a misuse of language to ask it.
Okay.
And that it was politically unimportant at that time. That religion, what influence does religion have? So afterwards, I really didn't think about religion at all until the rise of the political rise of conservative Christianity under the Reagan administration. But in 1994, I came out here and was flipping the channels on Monday nights and came across Atheist Talk, the cable TV show. And that was really my first exposure to organized atheism. And about a year later, I saw an advertisement for one of their happy hours, and I went to that and quickly got involved and became active with the group. So at that time, here in Minnesota, my early days, I was active in, again, politics. There's a group called the New Union Party that I was very active with atheism for the first time, and that was Minnesota Atheists. And after just a year as a member, I got elected to the board of Minnesota Atheists. And Toastmasters, I was getting involved in district leadership. So all of those things seemed to converge about the time that I formed this club.
And then 20 years later, nearly, I guess when you started it, do you think we'll have this thing going for 20 years, for 50 years? Or when you start, you just kind of want to start it and you don't think about how long something might last or succeed.
Right. It being around for 20 years, this is a pretty successful club. As a matter of fact, probably next year, I think, will be our 20th anniversary. So we'll have to have a big party for that.
Okay.
But it's a successful club. I only know of one other, and that's in Los Angeles, that meets at the Center for Inquiry building in Los Angeles, and that's Freethinker Toastmasters. And they got started about the same time we do. I'm not sure which one was first.
And at this point, you're very involved in all these organizations still, at least from my awareness of what you're doing with your free time. So I guess get into a little bit now, present day, how you spend your extra time to do whatever that you think is important at this point in your life.
Right. Well, there are a couple of obstacles. I'm old now. I'm 70 years old.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So...
well, happy 70th birthday whenever that happened. I said
that was last August.
Okay.
Right? This August.
A little late.
71. And I do spend time, or waste time, I should say, on things I really enjoy, which is just recreational, like walking through the park. And when last year, it seemed like a long time that I was able to walk through the park for a couple hours just about every day. I really haven't gotten into that routine yet this year, and I'm really getting antsy about it. But so I do try to make use of that time. Anyway, I see all these people walking around the park with earphones on, listening to music, and I'm usually mentally rehearsing my next speech or planning out what speeches I'll give for the different projects that I have to work in Toastmasters, that sort of thing. And planning out meals, too. So I'm doing that planning all the while that I'm trying to get exercise that'll keep me going for a few more birthdays.
Yeah. What do you hope comes of all this? I mean, you've been fairly active then in some of these organizations, as you mentioned, Minnesota Atheists, this club, and other things that you've done. What is your realistic goal of your existence as, being a part of these organizations and spreading a message?
Yeah, well, I'd like to see things grow. Now, I do think that atheism is part of a big movement now that is showing up demographically in counts of nuns, that is NONES, of no religious affiliation.
I saw the recent study or survey that suggested that group is the largest of any religious group. If you can group all of us
Right.
together as one, of those of us that do not affiliate with any religion, we're now the largest group in this country.
Yeah, the latest study that I saw, which is a month or so ago, had really the nuns, Catholics, and evangelical Protestants within the margin of error. So a statistical dead heat, but in absolute terms, nuns were the largest. Nuns were about 24%, and Catholics and evangelicals 23%. Everything rounded off. So yes, this is a time of large rise in skepticism, disbelief about supernatural gods. But there's a powerful movement, well-funded, well-organized, against it, that is opposed to science, is opposed to basic human rights that I think all atheists support, that based upon religion, such as opposition to women's rights, reproductive rights, opposition to GLBTQ plus rights, and so on.
As you look at that research or the study suggesting that it's about 24%, 23%, whatever that was at, I think what's so interesting about it is just the last, I don't know if it's the last 10 or 15 years, whatever they show, if you see the chart and the graph, it's just like the nuns, the peak, it's like it's almost a straight line up of the numbers of people that are recognizing, realizing, or maybe more comfortable with saying that, yeah, I don't believe in any of these things. I'm not a part of any of these things. And, that's been me through that process the last 15 years or so. And it was a kind of a long process for me to get from where I was to where I am now. And I'd imagine that maybe it's happening quicker for some people because of just the internet. And there's anything you're ever curious about, you can hear someone talk about it. And someone somewhere might begin to change your mind about something, especially if you're having your own doubts. And I wonder, because in my audience at this point, I don't know what the demographics are. And I sometimes wonder for the people that certainly don't have similar beliefs or disbeliefs as you and I, what they would even think about this conversation. If they've turned it off a long time ago, I don't know. But, when you are talking to someone that doesn't understand where you're at with your thinking, how do you best express yourself and possibly allow them to understand you as a person? Is that something that's gotten easier over the years, or is it a difficult thing?
Yeah. Everyone who knows me learns pretty quickly that I'm an atheist, that I accept that. And, if they want to have some relationship, some friendship with me, they have to accept that too. It doesn't bother me at all that other people are not atheists. That's fine that people have religions and whatever religious beliefs. But they cannot expect me to join with them in some ritual. For example, an invocation at some event. I'll stand respectfully, but I'm not going to, recite the prayer or the words. I handled the Pledge of Allegiance the same way because of under God in it.
So do you skip that line or skip the whole thing?
I skip the whole thing.
Okay.
I stand with my hands at my side and silent.
Yeah. I think it's pretty easy to be respectful of the things that you don't share with other people and just allow people to be who they are, because we're not all going to agree on the same thing. We can't agree on almost anything ever. So to expect everyone to agree on anything is kind of ridiculous. I think just understanding how someone might be, who they are, what's allowed their thinking. That's all.
I have some interesting experiences in Toastmasters that way. Quite a few years ago, the district governor asked me to give the invocation at the Saturday morning breakfast at the conference, the annual convention. And so I did. I got up and I gave a perfectly secular invocation about how important the skills that we learn in Toastmasters are outside of Toastmasters, how the feedback that we learn to give people is useful in every aspect of life, in work and in family and so on. And I looked up, and this was a breakfast meeting, and in front of me was the sea of people with bowed heads.
Have it, I guess. I think now we can move on to the personal growth segment. And I gave you a little bit of an outline of how I structure the podcast at this moment in time. So I'm curious what you're doing right now at age 70 to continue to improve yourself. And you can get into it, whatever comes to your mind of that, or just in general, the things that you felt throughout your life were the most pivotal growing moments for you, the things that you did for yourself, opportunities you took that led you down a path where you felt like you improved as a person in any way. So when I bring up that topic, what comes to mind?
Yeah. First off, as far as now, I don't really feel that I'm going anywhere. I'm aware of the decline that I'm expecting. It's just a normal aging process. But I don't have ambitions for myself. I'm not going to be winning chess tournaments and probably not going to be winning speech contests and so on. But I do enjoy myself and the people that I spend time with and try to be as helpful in any way as I can. I think that I can be of service in Toastmasters, both to the large organization and to the clubs that I'm in. I believe that I can be of service to Minnesota Atheists. I was a member of the board of directors, I think, for more consecutive years than anyone else has been. But I'm not. But I can be of service to the organization in other ways, working on the editorial board, working on the public policy committee, working on other committees for Minnesota Atheists. I also have a grandson, and I very much enjoyed the time that I can spend back with him and talking with him. And I hope that I can be of some enlightenment to him.
What state is he located in?
California.
Yes. So I know you get out there, once or twice a year at this point?
Yeah, once or twice.
Yeah.
So he's 12 years old right now. Will be 13 in August. And very, very bright kid. Very nice kid. His mother commented to me that she had never heard Wesley say a mean thing to anyone. I've mentioned that to other people, and they said, well, that's because he's an only child. He wouldn't be able to say that if he had brothers and sisters.
Yeah. Interesting. So not a lot right now that you're focusing on, but at certain points in your life, I'm sure you found some valuable moments. My college career, I was not especially dedicated to academics because I fell in with a group of chess players. Julio Caplan, who was world junior champion at that time, a number of other people who became grandmasters, senior masters, and so on. We were all at UC Berkeley at the same time and getting together practically every day. Really, it was during that time when I could see like the gap between me and, an international master or something, that I really came to learn and appreciate how to work. That the energy and organization that work requires, and dedication to it. And I developed an opening repertoire, for example, and really spent a lot of time not only in learning the moves that theory says these are the variations, but studying all of those variations and all of the games that I could find that were played by them, played with those lines, so that I understood all of the strategic ideas involved. I really tried to learn everything there was to know
about the opening variations that I played. And it takes a lot of time. Of course, chess is totally different now than when I was a chess player, and that's because of computers.
Is that the turning point where once we realized computers could beat the best human, that it maybe went on a decline of people getting into it, do you think?
I mean, that time that I'm talking about was a time when I thought that computers would never be stronger than humans. That the approach being completely different and just random search through variations. Computers at that time did not have the computational power, but also programmers were not as sophisticated in those days. And I had thought, and would be embarrassed if you were to find some past issues of Chess Life that would have some quotes from me, where I had thought that if it reached the point where computers could consistently beat grandmasters, that chess would die off. No one would have any more interest in chess once humans were relegated to minor, very incompetent players. And in fact, it's worked out to be exactly the opposite. One of the strong players, there are a lot more strong players now than there ever have been in the past. One problem with chess, and this was true when I was developing, was that in order to be a strong chess player, you have to play a lot of chess. No way to become a strong chess player just reading books alone.
Yep.
And when I was growing up and very enthusiastic 11, 12, 13-year-old, I looked forward to Friday nights that I could go down to the Redwood City Chess Club and play some chess. And that was the only opportunity for me to play chess. Nowadays, so in those days, all the strong chess players came out of Moscow, New York, Berlin, the major cities. Whereas now, people can always play against their computer. People can always get online in an internet chess club and play against someone somewhere in the world.
Yep.
And so people get a chance to play much more often. A lot more players have become strong, and strong at earlier ages.
Do you still play at all?
Not really. I go down to a chess club on Wednesday nights. I would normally be at one right now, but I made another plan.
Oh, yeah?
When I was laid off at Unisys during the Great Recession in 2008, I thought, well, I'll have some time. I'll get back into chess. And knew that it would take a while to study openings and all, and get caught up with the modern world. But thought that I would still be, senior master strength. And it really hasn't been the case. I find that I've lost the capacity for work, not just in preparation and study, but work at the board too, which is a lot of effort to work through a 5-hour chess game.
Yeah, that sounds like it can be mentally exhausting.
Yeah.
With this, the way that part of the conversation went, and another one in an episode that'll be coming up maybe a week or two after this episode, I am continuing to realize and learn something that I think had escaped my mind of. To be really good at anything, you need to put in so much time. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's obvious, but I think if you kind of just observe the world around us and people kind of maybe a lot of people not being that passionate about that much, I guess that's a general observation that may not even be true, but it's probably that. Unless you're spending a lot of time doing any one thing, you're going to kind of be doing nothing that well in particular. Yeah. And I think that maybe generationally right now, we're at a point where that type of thing might be happening. And I want the awareness to stick in my mind that I really need to focus more and more on the things I want to get really good at. And I'd hope that other people that are wondering why, if at times in their lives things aren't really going their way, they're not making great progress, it's probably because, like me at times, you're not spending enough time on things that are really going to help you.
Right. And there are a lot of distractions, I guess. But there's the opportunity to do things deeply at an early age in some ways. My grandson, whom I mentioned before, a couple of years ago, and I don't know how he's done since, if he has any interest in it now, but there was a game called, I don't know, Fortress 2 or something like this, and it's played in a variety of platforms, and he was playing it on, I know nothing about it, so I don't remember the platform, but he was playing in international tournaments online.
Yeah.
But against players in Europe and so on. And when he was 11 or 10, he was the world's number one ranked under 13 player.
Really?
On that platform.
Okay. Yeah, kids can really get good at whatever related to technology. Can get really good at. And some of the things I think turn out to be pretty useful, but I'm just afraid that some of it just really won't get individuals anywhere, and then they kind of have to start over at some point.
That's right.
And I think that's a fear, but who knows what the world's going to turn into.
If it only teaches them one thing, how to work.
Yes.
That's an important lesson.
How to put in a lot of time in something and find a way to at least not hate it, maybe kind of even enjoy it and possibly love it.
Yep.
And I think I've dabbled in enough things that I know I'm capable of putting a lot of time into something and not being concerned with how much time it's taking, which I think is the important way to possibly get really good at something. Any other personal growth topics that come to your mind, whether it relates to you or observations from the world around you and the people you've interacted with?
A general comment, and this political. But I'd say that a disappointment in my life has been that while I think I've always done very well at work, I've never really received job satisfaction, gotten satisfaction out of the job, because I've always regarded my work rather lowly, because the purpose of every job that I've had has always been to make a profit for some capitalist, rather than really working in service to mankind.
Yeah.
So, so I think that were I starting all over again, I might have gone forward with that idea of going into a service field of some sort, in which I might be able to make a difference.
It's now time for the Being Wrong segment here on People I Know show, and George Francis Kane is my guest today. I'm curious, as you look back on your life, is there something that stands out specifically that you can say with confidence that you were wrong about?
Well, sure. There are areas in which I've grown. I can think of one that just about everyone of my age has grown on. That would be GLBTQ rights. Of course, I never thought much about it, but never regarded them highly until it became a political rights issue. And then, of course, I was sympathetic to them, but not well educated in the matter. And I thought, well, there should be some institution in which they can enter into a relationship and have legal rights within that they otherwise would not. But so why not design such an institution? Why try to take marriage, which is an institution that was designed for a totally different reason of procreation? And then learning more about it, found that, well, no, they don't need anything completely different. It's really the same relationship as standard marriage. And so eventually I was persuaded to that.
I think I had a similar path on that. Like the civil union, I thought was a good middle ground. And it's like, you know what? People are people. Do people want to commit to their life together? And the term is marriage that we use. So that seems to work pretty well now. And as we get further away from the point in time where that became legally okay, I think it just seems to be more and more accepted by more and more people, which obviously is a good thing for those people that are specifically involved in that type of a situation. A few things that we talked about earlier in the episode, and the reason for this podcast at this moment in time is Freethought Toastmasters, where George and I first met. He founded the club nearly 20 years ago, and we have an open house on the 20th of May. It's a Monday night, beginning at 6:30 in St. Paul. But George helped me explain that if someone shows up to our Toastmasters club on that night, besides some pizza and some other beverages, including some wine,
that's right,
what they'll find, what benefit someone might get out of coming to a Freethought Toastmasters meeting, or if not that one, any Toastmasters meeting in general.
Right. First off, people do start gathering here a half hour before the meeting is gaveled to order. So please come at 6, and pizza will be available. We will I'm sure that we'll have food before the meeting for this meeting instead of after. And we'd like to get to know you. So come early, get a chance to meet some of us and chat about it, and we'll be glad to explain anything that happens during the course of a meeting. Toastmasters do some strange things that are a bit formal and might seem a bit strange to someone who hasn't been through it before. For example, we applaud a lot. I've heard one person say that Toastmasters is an applause cult, but we try to be supportive of each other. But
there's no one standing in front waving an applause sign or anything.
That's right.
It's pretty easy to catch on and figure that out on your own.
That's right. And also, we tend to address each other with formal names like Mr. Toastmaster, Mr. General Evaluator, and so on, which referring to function rather than the actual person's name. And that's helpful in some clubs. If you go to a lot of different clubs, you'll have to address someone when you don't know his name. So it's nice to be able to address him by the role he has at the meeting.
For sure.
We may do things that you don't understand, and that's okay. If we do anything that seems peculiar to you, feel free to raise your hand, and the Toastmaster will be glad to call on you and answer the question that you've got. So it's a very non-threatening, low-pressure environment.
We invite anybody to come join us to see what our club is specifically about and meet the members. And at the very least, obviously, both of us have found great value. You for much longer than I have, but in the couple years, 2.5 years I've been involved, I'm realizing I'll probably be in Toastmasters moving forward just to continue, have a space in my life to get better at something, public speaking, without it being every time I have to public speak being a very, very important speech, just to get better at it in the meantime. So if there are important speeches coming along at some point, whatever they might be, whether it's at a wedding or some other personal function, or maybe something in a career that I'm developing, that I'll be better at it and I'll be more confident when I step up there and have a chance to make an impact with the words that I say.
Yeah, and one thing that I find, I've been to a lot of different Toastmasters clubs in different areas, and everyone seems to love his Toastmasters club. But no one understands, well, why should I do anything outside the club? It's this club that I like. And Toastmasters actually offers a lot of opportunities, especially in leadership and other forms of growth outside of the club. Starting with being an area director, and then a division director, and then joining the trio, and maybe international director. And I've had a lot of friends who've gone through that and advanced to very high ranks in Toastmasters International. And one of the members of our club, in fact, is currently an important member of the district leadership. She is the district cartographer, and is the person who's responsible for coming up with all the alignment, with coming up with new divisions and new areas and so on.
We're pretty special to have a cartographer in our group, and Heather does a good job with that. Thank you for the conversation today, George, and I hope to see some new faces on May 20th. And for some reason you can't make it that day, the first and third Monday every month, anyone's welcome. Show up and we'll show you what it's all about, and maybe you'll join, maybe not, but hopefully it's worth your while. And I think for the people that show up, it is worth just to see what's going on in the world and try some new things out.
Okay.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to People I Know Show. Links are in the show notes for the People I Know Show Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube accounts. Please subscribe or follow those accounts when you visit them. You'll also find links for the Freethought Toastmasters May 20th open house, or if you're not interested in our club in particular but are interested in Toastmasters, you'll find a link there to find a club in your area. Also, the research study that George and I talked about involving which groups are the largest when it comes to religious affiliation or non-affiliation. I've also added a link for an article about that. Would you or could you help me make this show grow? If so, please leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It's really easy. Or in general, please interact with the posts that you might see on social media regarding People I Know Show. The more activity there allows more people to see it. Please also, you can encourage someone else from your life to listen. Maybe one of the best ways to do that is to share your favorite episode on social media. To email your feedback directly to me, Curt Carstensen, you can use the email address peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.